I used to listen to the radio a lot until about maybe 6 years ago. But now I'm thinking of going back to the radio.
What happened?
What happened? I think I became really busy. And when you're really busy now, there's less time to have the radio in the background. And I used to enjoy the BBC particularly back in the day. But now there are too many screens in my life. My daughter is watching too much television, too much iPad, too much. So I'm thinking of going back to the radio slowly.
You're not going to move towards the digital platforms like...
We're already there. It's part of our lives. It's already
So you
there.
did get time to scroll through Instagram, for instance, or Twitter?
Twitter, yes. Instagram, no. But I scroll a lot through Twitter. But as I said, there are too many screens in our lives nowadays.
Absolutely. What about podcasting? Do you listen to podcasts?
I do,
Because
which is
that's
similar to radio.
Yes.
Yes, very similar to radio. I do.
So do you find time for that? A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. The United Nations still has a radio service. Do you think it's still relevant?
Well, radio is relevant. So long as radio is relevant in the world, that service, I think, is still relevant.
Right. The theme this year is radio and climate change, a powerful tool for climate action. We're targeting people who live in the rural areas now.
Yes, and that's where radio comes in. I mean, it's one of the more secure forms of communication. It's one of the more secure ways to transmit information, to really get people to understand what's happening now with climate change. I think it's a valuable service, so yes.
But if you look at the numbers, it shows that 3.2 billion people will be listening to radio up until 2028. Is that a good thing or a bad thing in terms of with development, people sort of abandon these mainstream medium. But if you look at 3.2 billion people who will be listening to radio, what does it say in terms of development and technology?
I think you could interpret it many ways, quite frankly, but for me, it's neither good nor bad. It just is. So clearly those who are still listening to radio and depend on it as their main source of information are those that are at risk of being left behind. We know that. As I said earlier, I'm not spending that much time on the radio. I'm thinking of going back to listening to radio. But if 3.2 billion people are listening to radio, we should use that medium to make sure that we dialogue with these people who are still listening to radio. It's still a valuable source. And I think one of the key things that we have to focus on, this is the era of disinformation, unfortunately. Absolutely. So really making sure that the integrity of the information is preserved. Yes, a very valuable tool of reaching 3.2 billion people.
In terms of freedom of the press, do you think there is enough of it?
Where, globally?
Globally.
I think we've made great strides, I think, in the past decades as regards freedom of press. But of course, there's still challenges. There are too many different narratives in this world that we live in, and challenges to really ensure that all of those narratives are heard. But of course, underpinned by solid information of integrity, because as I said, there's so much disinformation nowadays. It's very hard for an ordinary person to know what to believe in.
With the access that people have to radio, do they actually have the opportunity of expressing their opinions?
Well, you could, well, yes. In the days when I used to listen to radio, I know that I would listen to these programs. It was a way of being informed about certain things that were happening or a particular topic. And of course, if you wanted to get engaged, you write letters, you research more, you introduce the discussion in your own circle. I think there is a means of expressing yourself with the information that is received.
With the digital age coming into place, do you think how long radio is going to be around for?
But I think it's like now we're all trying to eat organic. Remember the food that our grandparents used to eat, which we abandoned, and we had more modern foods. Now all of a sudden we're going back to those foods. I think that will be the same case of radio, because radio is a medium that I think focuses the senses somewhat, because you're mostly using your auditory system, not so much the visual. Whereas with the media we're consuming today, the technology we're consuming today, it just seems to take so much, right? At some point, I think it will be an overload, and therefore we'll start seeking those forms of media that are less taxing to the system.
How do we teach these young people to listen to the radio? Because I think some of them have just grown up, they've never seen a radio set.
Indeed, indeed. I think it's like everything else. The only way you can teach young people of using this media is by using it yourself.
Yes,
so my daughter has no idea what a radio looks like, quite frankly. She's 8 years old. But as I said, if I go back to radio, then she will know that, oh, well, there is this thing called a radio, and who knows, it might be something that she might take on towards her adulthood. So I think we need to start using it. If we recognize the value of radio, we should use it, and others will learn from that.
Madam Susan, I'm going to put radio aside for a moment. I just want to hear your views on what's happening with Donald Trump. In terms of WHO and UNRWA and all that. What does the UN have to say about that?
I am not the official spokesperson of the UN, so you'll have to find what the Secretary General has said on the subject. But I think we do understand that the American president has some very strong views about the participation of the United States in these institutions, and he has directed his government to withdraw from these institutions. They, of course, from the UN perspective, we think WHO is absolutely critical, quite frankly. Our world is so interconnected nowadays. But so there are discussions ongoing. And as regards UNRWA, again, from the UN perspective, we do not think any other agency, quite frankly, can do what UNRWA has been doing to support the Palestinian population. And there also, I believe, there are discussions ongoing, but we do take note, of course, of the American president's views.
As an African, as a Tanzanian, should I be worried? Should I be concerned with what's happening that might affect my life, our lives directly?
First and foremost, I think the American president does have the right to interpret the world the way that he does and to direct his government to behave in a particular way. So that is for America and for Americans. I think, quite frankly, for us here in Tanzania and elsewhere on the African continent is to find ways of managing our own affairs that minimizes the impact of what is happening in the United States.
Crown Media. Hapa ni nyumbani.